So, hi everyone, this is Dr. Henry, and I'm here to talk to you today about Chapter 7, Stress Management. Stress management is something that we all need to know more about because we all have stress. And stress is actually not a bad thing. Everyone has it in their lives, and the optimal amount of stress is the kind that makes us function well and gives us the motivation. But then stress that is too much or that is not managed in the correct way is the kind of stress that starts making us have physical problems. And that's when we start seeing the lost productivity, the absenteeism, and the healthcare costs that are really have gotten high in this country, and just things that happen as a result of people's stress. Now, the book talks about the mind-body connection, and this is really an important concept in stress management because we've probably understood all of our lives that when our body feels sick and we're not feeling good physically, it affects the way we feel mentally or emotionally. You know, someone who has chronic um, fatigue or that has chronic arthritis, they may have depression or they may just feel down because their body doesn't feel good. So we've always known that the body has always affected the mind, but what research has shown in the last several years is that the mind also affects the body, so that everything, arthritis, cancer, mono, the common cold, those can be influenced either for good or for bad by our emotions. And those make a difference in the way that our body feels, the way that we feel emotionally. So we need to talk a little about the immune system, because when we suppress our emotions, if we just decide to suck it up and not even worry about how we feel, then that is a suppressed emotion, and those are not good for our body. We start having physical symptoms after time. So those could be headache, it could be upset stomach, it could be a stomach ulcer, but after a while that will weaken our entire immune system. So the immune system is the part of our body. It's really our friend. It patrols our body and it guards our body against all kinds of attackers. A virus that's coming down the pike. If our immune system is in good shape, we're more likely to be able to fight that off. The immune system involves mainly, just to be very general here, lymphocytes, lots of them, and they are cells that kind of wage war against diseases and infections that try to attack our body. And antibodies are molecules in our body that do the same thing. So that is our immune system. We want our immune system to be as strong as it can be. And so when we have emotional issues, our immune system is weakened, and so we are more susceptible to physical issues. It just follows naturally. Now, the book talks about the fighting spirit, and this is really a neat thing to explore because some people seem to be almost born with the fighting spirit, but anyone can develop it. And if we express our emotions in a healthy way, both the negative and positive emotions, and we just feel like we're a more positive person, like we don't give up easily. Those are the kind of people who, when they get a physical illness, that mental mindset that they have is going to help them to feel better during a physical illness. And here in the second bullet point, it says, sometimes spontaneous remission from a seemingly incurable illness. And people that are fighters, those with the fighting spirit, they just enjoy better health and live longer. And a lot of times the physicians will say, I don't understand how this person can be doing so well. Their lab reports just indicate they should be feeling terrible. But people with a fighting spirit that is a mental, like I said, a mindset that makes us physically feel better. So a really good thing to develop in our life is that fighting spirit. So let's do a little bit of vocabulary here. So what is stress? What are stressors? Well, a stressor is anything that disrupts your equilibrium or your body's just normal internal state. So it can be a happy event, it can be a sad event. A stressor can be preparing for your own wedding, it can be the death of a loved one, it can be changing jobs, even if it's a good job change. So it can be either a good or a bad stressor or a negative or positive one. But if it disrupts your just kind of status quo, your equilibrium, and this says here the body's normal internal state, then that is a stressor. And so the second point here is what defines the stress response. And when we encounter a stressor, then our body has certain things that happen. And they're psychological things that happen in our mind. They're physiological things that happen in our body. And our body goes through those things in order to help us to cope with that stressor that has come along in our life. So like I said before, most of us, everybody has an optimal level of stress. And for most of us, that's not no stress. It is some stress. Some of us do better with a little bit more. We kind of like deadlines. We thrive with time pressure. Some people don't as much. So each person has, for them, it's personalized, an optimal level of stress. And everybody's reaction to a stressor is either what we call eustress or distress. And where you react to it in a positive way, it's eustress, and it helps us. We react to it in a negative way, it's distress. So when we are under a scenario where we have eustress, the good kind of stress, a stress that is positive for us and the right amount of it, we do our best performing, say on the job or at home. Or in athletics, we do our best. We have our best health conditions in those cases too. Think of an athlete before a game. Let's say a basketball player before a game. If they had no stress at all, if they were just so laid back about that game, they probably would not do their best. And yet, if they're too fired up about it and have too much stress regarding that contest, they're not going to play their best either. So for them, usually a medium amount of stress, and for every person, that's going to be different. But that medium amount of stress helps us to be motivated enough to try really hard, but not so motivated that we stumble over our feet because we're just too geared up. Distress is when we have unpleasant events or harmful stress. In those cases, especially after a period of time, health and performance kind of start to decline or deteriorate. And even in scenarios of good stress, something that we consider a good situation, a job maybe that we love, and it's kind of stressful, but we love it. If it goes on for too long, we kind of reach those physiological limits, and that means your body's limits, our mental limits, our emotional limits, and even a good stress can become distress when it reaches an unhealthy level. So what your body is trying to do, and God made us this way, and it's this perfect way that He made us, is that our body tries very hard to maintain that homeostasis, or that what I think of as the status quo. And it's just like your thermostat in your house. If you set it on 70 degrees, if it gets warmer than that, it adjusts to get it back to 70. If it gets cooler than that, it adjusts to get it back to 70. And our body tries to do the same thing. It wants that physiological balance, that homeostasis, or that status quo. And when a stressor comes along and disrupts that homeostasis, then that is when the stress reaction is triggered. And so three things happen during that, after that stress reaction is triggered. And we call this the General Adaptation Syndrome, GAS. So we have the alarm reaction stage, the resistance stage, and the exhaustion and recovery stage. So let's unpack those for a minute. In the alarm reaction stage, that's what happens when you first encounter the stressor. And so this is what we call the fight or flight syndrome, or the fight or flight mechanism. So let's say that you nearly got hit by a bus. You're crossing a street and a big truck or a bus comes out of nowhere and nearly hits you. Well, you're going to have an alarm reaction to that. And, your physiological response, your heart starts beating faster, your palms might get clammy, you might even just get kind of shaky in your body. So that's your alarm reaction. And maybe I'm in sleeping in my house during the night and I hear a crash in my house. And I think it's, a burglar in my house. That would be alarm reaction if I hear that loud noise. And that's your fight or flight mechanism. I can either get up with my, you know, hammer or something like that, and I can fight whoever I think is breaking into my house, or I can run out the back door and flee. So that's fight or flight. And we got to think that a lot of our stressors in the 21st century are not a bus hitting us or someone breaking in our house or a wild animal that we encounter in the jungle like in the old days. A lot of our stressors now are more psychological things, mental things that we have to deal with in our family at work. So it's a little bit different, the alarm reaction. We may not notice it quite as much at first. Then we go into the resistance phase. So this says if the stressor persists. So if I got up out of my bed and I got my hammer or whatever and I walk around my house looking and then I thought, oh my goodness, it was just the dog kicking over the trash can. That was no big deal. Go back to bed. So in that case, the stressor didn't persist. It just went on away. Or that bus stopped or it turned and it didn't hit me after all. So that's just kind of going back to status quo. You go back to sleep, go back to normal. But if the stressor persists, then the body kind of rises to the occasion. It tries its best to cope. So let's say that my husband was ill, and if he takes a lot of extra care and he can't work anymore, and that would be stressful for our family. And I have to take care of him and keep doing my job too. And that's a persistent stressor, something that might not go away for a really long time. And so my body would cope effectively, and really, I would be becoming superwoman. I just meet that challenge, I rise to the occasion, I do the best I can until he gets better. And the resistance phase can just go on for a good long while. But at the end of the resistance phase, one of two things happen. Either the stressor resolves itself, say my husband gets well and he gets to go back to work, or I become exhausted. So if he gets better, then I kind of go into recovery and the status quo has been reestablished. If he doesn't get better, if he keeps getting worse or stays the same, then I reach the exhaustion phase. And that means that I've just used up every bit of reserves that I have. Everything I've got in my body and my brain has been used up. And at this point, your body just starts functioning a little bit lower level, a little bit lower capacity. You may not be able to think quite as well. You're very tired, and you just cannot function quite as well. So in your book, you'll see this little graph, and it shows that alarm, resistance, and exhaustion recovery phase. And you see at that first part, the alarm comes up. It looks like, this lady, maybe her coworker, or maybe even a boss, has come and told her maybe some extra work that she's going to have to do. So if that's just a temporary thing, it might just resolve itself immediately, and she goes back to the orange line of homeostasis. Oh, this wasn't as bad as I thought. I'm going to be able to handle this fine. But if it really is a stressor that keeps on going, that's the resistance phase. And they keep working harder and harder and longer hours. And finally, we reach that exhaustion point where we just can't think well anymore. We cannot operate well anymore. And after that, eventually, hopefully, we recover. But sometimes we have to go through that exhaustion phase and sometimes even illness, as you can see on this slide, occurs before we can get back to that status quo or homeostasis again. So that is a general adaptation syndrome, GAS. Now this is a little 30-second body scan. So just, if you want to know if you're experiencing stress, let's just take 30 seconds right now. Scan your body and go. So if you said yes to any of those things in that list, you may be experiencing some extra stress right now. And different people do different things. I tend to maybe clench my teeth, uh, tap, kind of nervous tapping of the fingers or my foot or something like that. So different people do different things, but this is a really good 30-second body scan to ask yourself if you're under some stress right now. Now, we have to talk about behavior patterns here because sometimes the behavior patterns that we are exhibiting, they actually bring on stress. And most of us naturally fall toward one of these extremes. The type A behavior pattern, as you probably already know, is that hard driving personality type, very ambitious, maybe even overambitious, aggressive, sometimes hostile, very competitive at times, and that is the type A personality. The type B is the more laid back person, casual, more relaxed, more easygoing. Now, some of you might be saying, I'm kind of between those two, and a lot of us are. I exhibit some type A behavioral characteristics, but then in some areas of my life, I'm very type B also. So you don't have to be extremely type A or type B. But if you are a type A person, you may feel more stress. And a lot of the type A characteristics here, as it says, are learned behaviors. We learn to be time pressure sensitive. We learn to be in a hurry all the time. Sometimes we even just eat quickly because we're used to eating quickly. We can't even eat slowly anymore. So sometimes those are just learned behaviors. They're just habits. Sometimes those are just habits. So sometimes psychologists may do a structured interview to determine what type of person the personality has and a personality they have. And sometimes it's not their firmly ingrained personality. Sometimes it is just habits that they have fallen into. A little bit. Even if you are a person who thrives on deadlines, trying not to be a total type A person in all areas of your life is a little bit healthier. And I will say this, in the last few years, there's been research done that not every type A person is real super ultra competitive and hostile, and that those seem to be the ones that give us the most health problems, the extra over competitiveness and hostility that some type A people have are the things that are the most unhealthy about that personality type. So if you like time, deadlines, or you seem to like big challenges, but you don't necessarily have hostility or over competitiveness, you may be a modified type A, and that's a lot healthier. So we all have stress in our lives. And what we have to realize is that how we learn to deal with that stress is what's going to either increase or decrease our vulnerability to stress. And we just all have certain characteristics that either help or hurt us in this regard. And our overall health is one of them. The amount of social support that we have, do you have someone that you can call and talk to, whether it's a family member or a friend? Someone that you can have pick you up if your car breaks down or that can loan you $10? I mean, that's social support. What is your self-worth? Do you think you are a worthy person? And, to me, any Christian should have high self-worth. God doesn't make junk. God makes all of us in His image. And so if we truly believe that, then we should have good self-worth, but things happen in our lives that sometimes kind of beat us down, and our self-worth suffers. Nurturance. Are you able to nurture other people, or have you been nurtured in your life? So people that you feel like you like to take care of things, or that people like to take care of you. This is why a lot of times in senior living facilities, they have pets there because their kids and grandkids aren't there with them. They don't need to take care of anyone anymore. But if they have a dog or a cat that they can nurture and feel like they're taking care of them, that is actually good for their health. So all of these things, the health and the social support and the self-worth and the nurturance, they're all connected with each other. So in the book, there are several activities that you can do, and you may pause the video. I think it's a good idea to pause and take a look at those. Um, your current life stressors using the stress test in your book. And also there's a stress analysis form in your book. And, you know, for each stressor, sometimes it occurs at for different reasons or at different points. So for each stressor, you know, what is the situation under this occurs? When does this stressor kick in for me? Under which situation? What's my response to it? You know, what impact has it had in my life? Maybe very small, but maybe very large. You know, how do I currently handle this stressor? And what can I do to either avoid it or cope more effectively with in the future? You know, we've all heard the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to um, know the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I might have gotten that a little bit wrong, but you get the idea. You know, there are certain things in our life that we can change that will make us have less stress. We should change those. If our stress is occurring because of our family, you know, getting rid of our family is probably not a great idea. So we need to learn a different way to deal with it. So some stressors can be eliminated in our life, and some just we need to learn how to cope with them. So this is just some suggestions of some of the stressors in the lives of college students. And just look at this little circle and think which ones you think apply to you the most. I'm going to point out a few of these. We'll talk to some of them later on. Um, College students that still carry family responsibilities. This one over here on the right-hand side. Those college students have a lot of stress, just in my observation. Um, I've seen seniors get more stressed over choice of their future job. You know, they have a little bit of stress as freshmen choosing a major, and then they go along taking classes. That's the status quo again. But then when they're nearly out of school, that senioritis kicks in. They're just a little nervous. They're comfortable in college, but now it's the real world. So that's a difference too. Um, College red tape, just hassles with registration or with um, paying for your education, just any kind of financial things like that. I also find lack of privacy for some people that have moved in the dorm and they've never had to share a room with someone before, that there are just people everywhere. Of course, illness and injury can make college students have stress just because if we're ill for a while, we get behind in our classes and that kind of snowballs. So many of these could be stressors for college students. These are just some of the ones that I've noticed happening the most. So we have to identify the stress in our lives before we can learn to manage it, right? Now let's talk for a few minutes about sleep, because I honestly, you know, studies are showing right now, and I honestly believe that sleep deprivation is one of the biggest stressors for college students. I know my kids when they were in college, I mean, they didn't think about doing any homework or anything before midnight. You know, it was social things until midnight. Then you think about maybe doing some schoolwork, and they were not getting enough sleep. And, you know, sleep is important for all of us. It is what restores us every night. It is what helps us to heal when we have an illness. And so if we are getting not enough sleep on a regular basis, that's what sleep deprivation is, it is going to hurt our immune system. So we may get a virus or a stomach bug or a mono or something like that that comes around the flu. We may get that more easily. We can't think as well. You know, I tell students sometimes staying up all night to study for a test can be counterproductive because you're so tired the next morning when you take the test that your mental function is just not quite there. So our performance, whether it's physical performance or mental performance, it's not as good. So we have an impact on our mood, on our memory, on the behavioral patterns that we do. So behavioral patterns are like, you know, some people eat too much, smoke, drink, alcohol, take drugs. Those are behavioral patterns that can be very destructive. And of course, cognitive performance, just our ability to think. So, of the major groups of sleeping disorders, take a look at these and see what do you think um, is the biggest problem with college students. I'm guessing it's number 3, difficult adhering to a regular sleep schedule. You know, maybe some people try to just catch up on the weekends and sleep lots and lots on the weekend, but on weeknights, maybe they're getting, 4 or 5 or 6 hours. And then, of course, that leads to the difficulty staying awake, number 2, when you're in class. Many people my age have a hard time either falling or staying asleep. I can fall asleep easily, but maybe at 3 a.m. I might wake up and have a hard time going back to sleep. So middle-aged people, that's going to be a bigger problem. But sometimes college students can do that too. And of course, this fourth one is a category kind of all on itself, the sleepwalking and sleep terror disorder, which is not as common, but certainly some people deal with that also. So just kind of what we've already said, it hurts our ability to pay attention. You know, you can't pay attention in class, and if you did try your very best, you just don't remember any of it later. Staying up late and then either sleeping in the next day or trying to catch naps between classes, those disrupt our circadian rhythms. And circadian rhythm is just kind of your sleep and wake cycle. And it needs the healthiest circadian rhythms are those that are regular. If you go to bed about the same time every night and get up about the same time every morning, it says most people require about 8 hours of sleep. Some college students even do better on 9 hours. I do pretty well on 7 to 8 hours. I try really hard to go to bed at by 11 o'clock every night, and I get up about 6:20. So that's, 7 to 8 hours, unless I wake up in the middle of the night and can't go back to sleep, and then that is going to disrupt my circadian rhythm. It makes it harder for me to concentrate the next day. So whatever your sleep pattern is, try to make it fairly consistent if you possibly can. So this just shows some steps that we can take to enhance our quality of sleep. And there's another slide in a minute on these. See which of these would help you the most. Look at number 3, electronic devices and watching television. There's some studies that show that just the screen itself, the brightness of a screen, whether it's your phone looking at social media or whether it's doing an assignment on Canvas or me grading an assignment on Canvas, but just that screen, a TV screen, a computer screen, a phone screen, that those kind of keep us from having good sleep when we go to bed. So if you could try hard not to do those types of activities right before bedtime, that would probably help. Okay, let's move to the next screen. Exercising and being physically active helps, but not right before bedtime. If you exercise within an hour of bedtime, it's probably going to keep you awake. Some more suggestions here. Some students and adults get into a kind of a bad cycle of taking naps in the daytime, and then it keeps them from going to sleep at night. So that's kind of a bad pattern to get into also. So, very good suggestions. Take the ones that apply to you and run with them. Now, another thing that I think causes stress for students, I know does, is time management. Because when you were at home in high school, you probably had parents or a parent who said, have you done your homework yet? Don't you need to be getting in bed? They kind of help you to structure your day. And when we get in college, there's not any of that happening. And we have our class schedule, but everything else, we can kind of schedule it whenever we want to. And that becomes problematic, especially for first semester freshmen, because they just have never had to do that before. So trying to still eat meals at the same time every day, trying to think, okay, do I have a lot of homework tonight, or do I have a test coming up on Thursday? Maybe Monday night is a good night to start studying for that test and not wait until 11:30 on Wednesday night to start. So looking ahead a little bit, planning your time, and just having a little bit of self-control over um, whether you can go out and do something with your friends that night, or whether this is the night that you need to stay in and do schoolwork. My daughter, when she was about a junior in college, this is my youngest daughter, she lived with three other girls, and they had easier majors than hers was, and she had to study a lot because she was taking some science classes. And they would say, "Oh, Amanda, let's go out and let's go out and eat tonight. Let's go do so and so. You can study later." And she finally had to say, "I need to study now and later." You know, um, I'm trying to manage my time well, and she had fallen in that pit of thinking, "Oh, I can study later," and sometimes later just came a little bit too much later. So, just managing your time, and we have some good suggestions for time management here also. What are you using your time for that's killing a lot of time? For a lot of people, it's TV. For a lot of people, it's social media. They just get sucked into that hole of looking at more and more and more on, Instagram or Twitter or whatever you use, and it never ends. You can just keep on looking at feeds. So the time killers, I find what they are and try to restrict those. If you have a term paper to write, long-term and short-term goals are both good. Sitting down and writing a whole paper is very daunting, even for me. It still is. But if I say tonight I'm going to get the outline done, tomorrow night I'm going to just write the introductory paragraph, that is huge. So just those short-term goals, and then I'm going to have this paper done by a week from now. So those really do help. Prioritizing helps. Some things that we need to do just are higher priority than others, and we need to spend our time on the more high priority items instead of the low priority ones. Using a daily planner, some people still love written planners instead of electronic ones, but whatever works for you. Nightly audits are just like, what did I need to get done today and what did I get done? And if you do this right at bedtime, it can actually keep you awake, so that's not good, but it's good to see, what did I do today, what did I not get done, and why didn't I get it done? Was I back to number one using those time killers? So those are just good steps to time management. And this is just a list of time management skills. So look at this list and see which ones you need the most. This is going to be different from each student. For some of us, for me, saying no is a big one because I tend to say yes to pretty much everything. Get it done. I think that just means just get it done. Quit delaying. Just start it and do it. And sometimes we need to do that. Eliminating distractions is a big one for me too. See which ones are appropriate for you. Okay, we'll move on. So, techno stress is something we need to talk about. And we have so much technology and it is great in so many ways. But when you get notifications all the time, you're constantly getting a beep or a ding because you got a new notification on Twitter, or you got a new notification on Instagram, or a text, or an email. We don't need all those notifications, and you can set that to eliminate those. So I need notifications for some things, but for a lot of things, I can just wait till the next time I check and look at my Twitter account or at my texts. I don't necessarily need everything that comes in because it's so distracting if you're trying to work on something that takes concentration and you keep on getting dings and beeps. It's also stressful for people sometimes to just keep up with the change in technology. our classrooms that we teach in. Every couple of years we have a different type of system, and we have to learn to do it again. And so you see how that constant connectivity to the internet, it has great advantages in our lives, but it can be stressful for us too. So just kind of maybe limit the amount that you are on social media, limit the amount of notifications that you get. Those are helpful suggestions to me. Okay, we're going to talk now about how we cope with stress. And we all have stress, and some people have more than others. But this first bullet says the amount and type of stress are kind of important, but really the way we perceive it and cope with it is even more important. And perception is so important. Some people, if you perceive something as being stressful for you, then it is. And I can tell you all day long, why are you nervous about speaking in public? Speaking in public is not stressful. It's not stressful for me because I'm a teacher. But I can tell you that all day long. If you perceive public speaking as being stressful, then to you it is stressful. And no amount of me telling you it's not is going to make any difference. So the perceptions are huge. So recognizing what is stressful for you, and like I said, either identifying or removing that stressor. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can. So removing the stressor that we can remove. And sometimes if you can't tell what's stressful for you. So keeping a log and saying, when am I starting to feel my heart beating fast, or my stomach, my gut kind of clenching? These symptoms are what I'm feeling. What are the events leading up to this? So for some people, keeping a log is useful. And then we have several time management and relaxation techniques. And we're going to talk about stress management techniques in a minute. So these are the techniques we're going to talk about tonight. Physical activity is the first one, and then we'll talk about progressive muscle relaxation, breathing techniques, and then some meditation, yoga, tai chi, and visual imagery. So those are the ones we're going to concentrate on in this chapter. Now, why does physical activity help with stress? It really, really does. And people think, I already don't have enough time. If I exercise, I'm going to have even less time. That sounds logical, but it's not. If you will take the time to get some physical activity, even if it's just a little bit, it will make you more productive later because your brain just works better after you've been active. So you're going to reduce muscular tension because you're going to do something muscular and active instead of just thinking all the time. When we are in school and we use our brains all the time, just doing something with our bodies really relieves that muscular tension. Those physiological changes that trigger the fight or flight mechanism, and we all get dry mouth, clammy hands, fast heartbeat. Those happen with everybody. But sometimes the physiological changes that trigger that fight or flight, like being in a hurry, or just tension, the physical activity, tension like in your clenching your teeth, or one of those behaviors, it's not really necessary. Our heart rate is going to speed up. We can't help that from happening. But clenching our fists or tightening up our jaw, we can eliminate those if we do physical activity. That helps with those. Endorphins are wonderful substances in your body that just kind of produce that soothing, calming, everything's going to be okay feeling. And exercise really does produce endorphins. We talk about the endorphin high, and that is a real thing. And then we have both immediate effects on mood and lasting effects on mood. So right after you finish a workout, you feel just so accomplished, and you just feel less stress mentally and even physically. And that lasts for quite a long time. In fact, people that exercise regularly just have fewer stress effects, period. Their mood is just going to be better. Now, there are a couple of kinds of exercise that are meant to really any kind of exercise really helps with stress. I mean, running, beating a boxing bag. I mean, um, any of those are, lifting weights. Any of those are great activities, but some exercises are actually made um, to help us manage stress. So yoga is one. I'm a yoga teacher, so I really believe in this one. And in yoga, we kind of link together the postures or the poses in our yoga um, practices. We link those together with our breathing. And so it helps us to breathe more deeply. We do a lot of stretching in yoga, which kind of helps our muscles to be able to relax better. We learn to breathe more deeply and more slowly. And the meditation in yoga helps us to be able to shut out certain stressors from our mind and concentrate on things that are good in our lives instead of the negative things or the things that are causing us time pressure. So all of those components of yoga are good for stress relief. It also increases flexibility because we do so much stretching. And if you're in more of a power yoga or some types of yoga classes, you'll get more strength and endurance because the poses are linked together to create an increase in strength and endurance. And all yoga classes are different, but a lot of them will do that also. So yoga has been found to not only manage stress, but helps us to decrease blood pressure because the way that it helps us control our thoughts and control our breathing is really valuable. Now, Hatha Yoga is the kind of yoga that we practice in the United States, and Hatha Yoga just means yoga for health or the physical practice of yoga. And, back hundreds of years ago when yoga was first, invented, I guess you would say, um, yoga was a whole way of life. It involves certain diets, certain ways of thinking, certain practices, and yoga in the States, the United States, in this day and age, is more of just you go to a yoga class. It's just a physical practice of yoga, but still, those sequences of stretching postures that we do, and yoga teachers, we put those sequences together in a certain way and they help us to relax. So even if you're not doing meditation with your yoga, um, the Hatha Yoga really helps us. Tai Chi we think of it as being for old people because it is very gentle on the body, but it can help people at any age. It started out being kind of a self-defense type moves, and young and old people can benefit from it. I've seen quite old people, like even into their 90s, performing Tai Chi. And the movements in Tai Chi require a lot of concentration. They require some coordination in a very slow, controlled method. The breathing, just like yoga, very slow and controlled breathing. They help us to relax. A little bit for strength. I have not found most Tai Chi classes to be very strength inducing, but maybe a little, especially for older people. They will help with flexibility and just your gait and your body balance because there's a lot of shifts of the center of gravity to the right and to the left and forward and back. So they help with those things also. But mostly good for, most of the reason that they are good for stress relief is just because, again, of the slow breathing and the slow controlled movements in Tai Chi. Progressive muscle relaxation is very nice, and it is when you go through your body from the top of your body to the bottom of your body, and you contract one muscle group at a time and then let it relax. And there's a progressive muscle relaxation um, exercise in your book, and it'd be really good to do this, but you need someone to read the instructions to you as you do them, or you can record them or something. And because you want someone telling you what to do, like the first one, point your feet, curling your toes downward, steady the tension in the arches and the top of your feet. Hold and continue to note the tension and then relax. And so after doing the feet, then you're going to uh, move your feet upward toward your face. and then heels into the floor, and then right thigh, left thigh. So you move up the body, first tensing that muscle group and then relaxing it. And it really leaves you feeling very relaxed at the end. Also, you learn to see those parts of your body that you tense. Like when I'm doing progressive muscle relaxation, we get to the part about the jaw, like tightening up your jaw and clenching your teeth. When I do that in progressive muscle relaxation, I think, oh my goodness, I do this a lot. I do this without knowing her. Or taking your tongue against the roof of your mouth. I think, I do this. I tighten up my mouth muscles without knowing it. So it helps you to kind of be more in tune with what your body is doing, because you can recognize some of those muscle tightness postures as you're going through the relaxation exercise. Breathing techniques. These are just like, and we do these in yoga, but we can do them just at our desk if we want to. So taking really deep inhales, large breaths, big inhales, just a big expanding breath to fill the lungs completely, and then a big, huge exhale to breathe away the tension. And a lot of times we do it, say, to a count of, say, just pick a number, 8. Breathe in a slow count of 8. Breathe out a slow count of 8. You know, physiologists will tell us that we only use maybe about 10% of our lungs. We have so many of those little air sacs, alveoli, in our lungs, like 300 million of them. And we only use maybe the top 10% of those. We just use the top of our lungs to breathe. We don't take those deep breaths that get the air all the way down into the bottom of our lungs. So doing that is a really relaxing practice. The breathing techniques take a little bit less time, fewer minutes than progressive muscle relaxation. You can do that in 1 minute. Progressive muscle relaxation, I would say to allow 10 minutes for that one. So just deep breathing, sighing, and complete natural breathing. And your book kind of differentiates among these types of breathing. Visual imagery is just thinking maybe of a very relaxing place, somewhere you would love to be. And maybe it is your favorite place on earth. Maybe it's the beach. Maybe it's in the mountains. Maybe it's in your dark bedroom. But just whatever you can think of these relaxing just scenes and make those mental pictures in your head with your eyes closed, and try to think of the sounds of that place, the way that place smells, the way that place feels on your skin, the way that place looks in your mind. And so visual imagery, you could just take yourself on a little mini vacation. And you can use it kind of in conjunction with deep breathing as you're doing this imagery. And it's used many times with meditation and yoga also. So mental imagery is great. And like I said, a mini vacation, it doesn't have to take more than a few minutes to do. But it can kind of take our stress away, or at least minimize it. Meditation, I gotta admit, I'm not as good at this one. We try to control our attention span a little bit more. We do try to clear the mind and block out the things that are causing us stress. And I do tell my yoga classes this at the end of class, when we're in our final relaxation, I'll say, and even at the beginning of class, whatever cares and worries you have at this point, leave them outside the door before you come in this room. We're not going to think of those while we're practicing yoga. And we're certainly not going to think about them during our relaxation period at the end of our practice. We are going to fill our mind. I have a hard time with a blank mind, so I have to fill it with good thoughts, happy thoughts, pleasant thoughts. And so controlling your attention to those kinds of attention instead of things that are stressful and the things that will increase tension. Once you learn some good basic meditation techniques, you can kind of use those whenever you are in a stressful situation, even just for a minute or two. And this slide tells us mindfulness meditation involves heightened awareness of the present moment. And this is something in yoga that we stress. trying to stay in the present moment, trying to live in the moment you're in right now and not letting the past drag you down or the future overly concern you. Obviously, we have to plan for the future. You do need to study for your test tomorrow that you have in a class. You don't need to just kind of be so much in the present moment that you don't plan for your future. But dwelling on the future and worrying about it is stressful. And in meditation, we just try to be, in mindfulness meditation, we just try to be more mindful and stay in the present moment. So, which technique is best for you? You know, different things work for different people, and just depends on where you are and the time that you have. It doesn't really matter as long as it works for you. I love the mindfulness meditation that we do in yoga. I love the deep breathing exercises. I love the progressive muscle relaxation, even though I don't do that one as often because it takes longer. So remember that what works for you, that not only causes your stress, but also is what helps you to relieve your stress or manage it. So just like the stress response and the stressors are different for each one of us, what works to alleviate our stress is also different for each one of us. For college students, better time management and getting adequate sleep are huge techniques. But some of these other exercise helps practically everyone with stress. Some of the others with the imagery, the breathing, the progressive muscle relaxation, the meditation, you could use some of those. None of them are a combination of them. But what we do know is that if we take control of our stress levels, and this last statement is so true, we're going to have a happier and healthier life. Because remember, the mind, where we perceive stress, that has a great impact on our body. It impacts our disease states. It impacts how often we get disease, how often we get sick. So if we can help manage our stress, we'll be not only emotionally healthier and mentally healthier, but also physically healthier too. So try some of these out. Hope they will help you. Thank you very much for your attention.